This is the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast, hosted by David Charlton, and you're listening to this podcast to help you build your own mental toughness, so that you can support other people or your clients better. Either way, you will learn more about developing this plastic personality trait that all but guarantees that you will perform better and lead a more prosperous life. Hi, and welcome to the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast with your host, David Charlton. And today the sun is shining again. The temperature has dropped. It's been lovely recently. Then we've had some rain, and we're probably about 5 or 6 degrees cooler than what we were last week and then the week before. I'm going to be going off on holiday very, very soon. So I'm praying and really hoping that this is not the slide and the start of some poor weather. Anyway, on to the show. So the last 2 episodes, we've looked at self-compassion and dealing with different challenges. Today's challenge and today's episode it's very similar, where I do go on to share another technique, another tool from self-compassionate focus therapy. And this relates to competitiveness. So many athletes are very, very competitive. And it's a good trait to want to win. To be able to see yourself winning is a great, great thing. And competitiveness essentially is about dreaming of winning. It's about wanting those feelings of winning, of beating opponents, of crunch time, of being really fired up to win. And to win no matter how you're actually feeling and actually playing at the time. It's not caring about your opponents and how they feel. It's being able to crush your opponent or feel like you're going to crush your opponent, having that killer instinct. Certainly, if I go back to my childhood, well, my adulthood actually, Tiger Woods is the great example of that when he was in his prime. Then, if we think about confrontations, the winner, there's someone who's competitive, will not mind confrontations because, again, they've got this sole focus about winning. If I think about football, it would be if there's a penalty kick, the competitive person, no matter whether that penalty kick was in a friendly or whether it was the World Cup final, they would want the ball and they would want to score that winning goal. Now, are there downsides to being competitive? Of course there are. There's downsides to all traits. There's downsides to being confident in your ability. There's downsides to having fantastic emotional control. If we're thinking about competitiveness, it could well be the other extreme is tears, there's tantrums, there's snapping golf clubs over your knee, there's arguing with your teammates, there's struggling to get to sleep at night, there's focusing in on all of the things that have gone wrong. And often people do so. Often people beat themselves up so much. They just think about the bad shots or the bad passes, the bad points. They lose perspective. And essentially this exercise is set up in a way to actually help this type of person to try and regain some perspective. So it is for that person who is very, very self-critical again in these situations. The reality is this can be very difficult when you're in this emotionally charged situation, when you're tossing and turning, trying to get off to sleep. But I'm hoping that you will consider it, even if you are someone who does struggle in this regard. So the tool, as you'll be aware, if you've read the title of the episode or have listened to the last 2 episodes, episode 129 and 130, is linked to self-compassion again. So let's think about self-compassion for a moment. Essentially, it is compassion directed inwards towards yourself. And Kristen Neff, who's done an extensive bit of research in this area, suggests that self-compassion consists of 3 main elements. You've got kindness, a sense of common humanity, and mindfulness. And these 3 elements combined help to form a self-compassionate mindset. Kindness element of self-compassion involves being warm and understanding towards ourselves, rather than self-critical when we are suffering. So we're not going to label ourselves or think that we're rubbish, that somebody is better than us. It's to be able to change our inner dialogue so it's more gentle and encouraging. Yet it's also to be very honest with ourselves, to be able to acknowledge that we aren't perfect. Nobody is, after all. It's to be able to recognize our shortcomings with openness and without judgment. And in these competitive situations, so many people do go on to use harsh, very self-critical language. Why did I do that? It was a stupid mistake to make. I'm a failure. Sarah would never have decided to play that shot. And this exercise is linked to being kind to a friend. So what would a close friend or a stranger do? That's what we're going to look at. And ideally, we're going to be nice to them. So if your friend, your best friend, was playing a huge event and they choked, they gave it all away, I would hope that you wouldn't tell them how rubbish they were. If you're going to be nice to them, you're not going to rib them and take the mickey out of them. And research had shown that most people are kinder to other people and not themselves. And then when you do throw in situations or events that are beyond our control, like the big sporting match or competition, the same is also true. This research has been done by Kristen Neff. So we're going to use this tool now. But before we do, I just want to make one point. You may actually feel a little bit worse after beginning to practice self-compassion or for doing this exercise, as it's foreign. And Kristen Neff advises that it can be similar to a fire. When a door is burning on a house and it's opened, oxygen goes in and the flames actually rush out. This can be a similar process when practicing self-compassion. Kindness goes in, but pain and anguish actually come out. This, though, doesn't mean that it's going to be a bad thing longer term. So come on, let's move forward with the exercise. So step 1, we're going to assume that you're in a kind and caring mood. Your best mate, your best friend has played the biggest competition that they're likely to play in, and they've choked at the very end. Much like John van der Velde did in the 1999 Open Championship, or Jana Novotná did in the 1993 Wimbledon final against Steffi Graf. So they've choked, they're feeling terrible, they're being very self-critical. What would you say to your friend? How would you behave? Consider the tone of your voice, the speed of your voice when you're talking to them, and your behaviors. Step 2, I'm guessing your tone was quieter. It's kind, it's slow. You gave some love and some support, I would like to think. You gave them opportunities to speak too. If you're animated, if you're loud, and you're talking fast, would that actually be the best response? So now step 3. I'd like you to think about a time when you were struggling after a defeat, or when things didn't go well for you. Write down what you actually did, what you said to yourself. And again, you're going to note the tone, the speed of this inner dialogue. I'm guessing it wasn't a pleasant task actually doing that little exercise. We're going to move on to step 4 now. In step 4, it's to recognize, was there a difference between how you responded to a friend versus how you actually responded to yourself in those situations? And if there is, I'd like you just to think about that. And why? Why would you treat yourself differently to others? It could well be a very difficult question, I'd imagine. Often it's simply a learned behavior. It's a habit. It might be something you've modeled from parents or from a coach who's harsh and critical. Perhaps when you were younger, your parents would criticize you often, and maybe they still do today. Or you're in an environment, in a club, in an organization where there's lots of critical feedback. Have a little think about it and what shaped the way you talk to yourself. Step 5 now, and this is the last step. It's simply like you to consider how things would actually change if you did respond to yourself in the same way that you actually would respond to a close friend when they were struggling or in a competitive situation, as we've discussed. Do you think you might feel calmer, quicker? Do you think you may sleep better that evening? You know, self-compassion, it isn't about being soft. Some people in sport worry about that. They also think if we're self-compassionate, we're going to lose that competitive edge, that advantage. This isn't true. The only way you're going to lose that competitive edge is if there's a shift in your life and your values are completely thrown apart. There's got to be a massive upheaval. self-compassion is very, very different to being competitive or to being highly motivated. They're very different traits. So please do take note. When things in sport or your life don't go according to plan, try to treat yourself as you would a good friend. Try to take the lessons from episode 129 and understand more about self-compassion and how you can cultivate motivation. You might even want to release those thought balloons as we did in episode 130 and see what happens, see what it feels like. The more you practice being compassionate towards yourself, the more it's likely to become natural, which means it's going to become a habit. And then when you are in these high pressure situations, when you've been defeated, when you've made mistakes, the aftermath might well not be so bad. It's never a nice feeling, but this could help you move on more quickly. So if you've got any questions, please feel free to join me in the Sports Psychology Hub. It's a Facebook group that I've set up, and fire away any questions that you've got. You can also leave a positive review, a 5-star rating on the podcast, in Apple or Spotify, or any other channels if you like. I'd really appreciate it if you could do. Have a fantastic week ahead. If you enjoyed this episode of the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast with David Charlton, do check out my website, sport-excellence.co.uk, and my online sports psychology resources. The Sport Excellence website has essential resources for anyone looking to build their own mental toughness or the mental toughness of their athletes or teams, or if you want to achieve peak performance more often or optimal functioning. The Sport Excellence website has everything you need to keep moving forward and thrive. So go on, head over to sport-excellence.co.uk to find out more.